everyone, and thank you for coming. I would really like to introduce you to John Arbuthnot. He is the CEO of a Canadian MSO, or an MPO, as we say, multi-province operator. It's the 5th largest in Canada, the 7th fastest growing in retail. So, John, you were telling me backstage that you started this company when you were quite young. How did that come about?
Yeah, so Delta-9, we started working with Health Canada back in 2008, 2009 around reform of the previous medical cannabis program in Canada. 2013, we became the 4th licensed commercial cultivator in Canada on the medical side, essentially producing cannabis products, distributing those to medical patients through a mail order program. From there, the company's evolved quite rapidly in the wake of adult use legalization in Canada. And today, as you said, now one of the few operators that is vertically integrated, participating not only in the cultivation, but also the retail space, and then an expanding infrastructure business as well.
And you mentioned even though you started out in medical, the majority of your business is adult use now.
Yeah, so legalization in Canada, 2018, really the business model for us pivoted quite drastically. We were in a state of rapid expansion. We raised about $10 million privately throughout the year in 2017, listed our shares on the Toronto Venture Exchange in November 2017. Since that time, we've raised about $85 million through a mix of debt and equity to fund the expansion of our 3 main business segments. So again, licensed by Health Canada on the cultivation, processing, and wholesale distribution side of the industry, producing Delta-9 branded consumer packaged products. We vertically integrate directly into the retail segment. We operate 16 bricks and mortar retail stores, as well as direct to consumer online currently. And we sell our proprietary growing platform. We sell cultivation equipment. We set up facilities for third-party operators across North America. So consider that more the picks and shovels side of the industry.
Right, we were talking about your rapid expansion plan into the States, which is primarily going to focus on your hardware. So tell us more about those plans. Yeah,
so Delta-9's proprietary growing platform, we call the Grow Pod, but is effectively a retrofitted shipping container. So we take a standard C-can, 40-foot high cube container. We install customized wall panels, electrical, lighting, HVAC, security systems. All that gives us a unit that's modular, it's scalable, it's also stackable, so operators can grow on multiple levels within their facility. Now, a number of benefits we feel to the Grow Pod growing platform. It's very different, obviously, than the big open warehouse or greenhouse or outdoor models that we see from a number of operators. But it allows us to dial in factors that directly contribute to product quality, so temperature, humidity, light intensity, all of that dialed in very precisely, and with an eye towards standardization. So really looking to position operators using the Grow Pod, including ourselves, that we have a reproducibility in our cultivation platform. So the ability to reproduce results for potency, for yield, et cetera, on an ongoing basis. So I think that's the real foundation. It obviously gives us built-in risk mitigation as well. But as you mentioned, big focus for expansion for the company is now that US expansion, selling these Grow Pods to operators within the United States.
And I think the Grow Pods will be essential because with the lack of interstate commerce, one of the hardest issues that MSOs are facing is standardized quality control. So how does your system address that?
Yeah, we learned a lot in Canada from legalization. We saw a number of operators, they scaled across the country by acquiring different facilities. And then they tried to produce the same product across those facilities and achieve the same level of quality control, and it's just very difficult. So a lot of the foundation of the Grow Pod is really giving you that platform that we can put a Grow Pod in New York, we can put a Grow Pod in California, and with the same genetic cultivar, we can produce that same strain. So in our mind, that becomes the foundation of building a brand, is really that ability to produce the same product time and time again in any jurisdiction around the world.
Wonderful. Now, you mentioned building a brand. You have your own proprietary retail stores which sell your in-house brand, but also sell other brands. Do you plan on replicating that model in the United States?
Yeah, we very much like the vertically integrated model in Canada. We've seen that as the Canadian market has evolved, it's obviously a difficult market environment. It's highly competitive. There's price and margin compression really across the Canadian industry. That vertically integrated approach has allowed us to push distribution of our own branded products through our own stores, direct to end consumers. We actually enjoy within our own stores about 25% market share. while we are only about 2% market share nationally on the wholesale side. So it shows you just how much we are able to influence the end consumer in guiding them towards Delta-9 branded products.
So I imagine having access to that data is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge benefit to retail is that we're literally processing thousands and thousands of transactions every day. We're having the discussions with consumers. We're seeing pricing strategies, product trends from our competitors as well. That data is invaluable for us. It's data that we have that very often our pure play licensed producer and CPG competitors are looking to pay for. So we really use the data that we're getting from our retail chain to guide the investments that we're making on the cultivation, the manufactured product side of our business. Again, huge benefit to retail.
Absolutely. It is a data-driven business.
Cannabis or otherwise, data is key.
Absolutely. And what trends have you noticed that this data is steering you towards?
Yeah, so, it's really initially the value that we saw in the wake of legalization in Canada was starting to get a sense of pricing trends, seeing where our products, where other producers' products were fitting. Do you position as value? Do you position as premium? From there, it can be things like what packaging sizes are consumers gravitating towards? Is it 1 gram or is it full ounces? So being able to dictate how we invest into these product categories. From there, 1 year after legalization in Canada, the industry evolved again. We brought on what we call Cannabis 2.0 products that essentially expanded the industry beyond flower and pre-rolls toward more of the derivative products. So this is, your edibles, this is drinkables, this is vape pens, things like that. We started to see how those categories would evolve. We started to see that things like ingestible oils, vape cartridges now are the largest derivative product categories currently in Canada by revenue. So our first entry into the derivative product market was into those categories. Obviously, if there's larger market share within those categories, you're going to see a higher return on investment. Conversely, edibles and drinkables, while there are large unit sales, we are very restricted in Canada on how much potency is able to go into those products. So we haven't seen the uptake from consumers in terms of percentage revenue into those categories. They're highly specialized, so we would shy away from that type of investment. So, again, those trends, the data and analytics that we're seeing from retail really is invaluable in terms of how we invest our investors' capital and where we're going to see a return.
But would you say the bulk of your output is flower?
Yeah, Delta-9's currently producing about 8,500 kilos per year of flower. Our principal revenue makeup last calendar year was about 75%, or 70%, coming from the flower segment, about another 15% from pre-rolls. But we are seeing large growth in our vape pens and our ingestible oils. And interestingly, the demographics for ingestible oils are not your typical cannabis consumer.
Right, I remember you mentioned that it was more of a senior demographic.
It's where we're seeing the non-traditional cannabis consumers now coming into these stores in Canada. Really, they're buying it for aches and pains. They're buying it to assist with sleep. They're using it to replace other pharmaceuticals that maybe they're taking for various reasons. So consider that more the wellness trend. Actually, before legalization, we conducted a survey with one of our provincial distribution partners. It showed that 18% of Canadian adults were using cannabis at least once per year. In the wake of legalization now a few years later, that's up to 22%. We would actually chart that more towards 30% by 2030. And a lot of the growth is not your conventional cannabis consumer, that preconceived notion of who a cannabis consumer is. A lot of the growth that we're seeing in those product categories is coming from an older demographic.
And their preferred way of consuming would not be flower. It would be
I can never imagine my mother smoking a joint or a vape, but she does enjoy ingestible oils. So again, it's those non-traditional consumers that are finding their way into cannabis stores and spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a year now on cannabis products. They would have never participated in cannabis prior to legalization.
I agree. Now, as far as your expansion plans, because you are expanding rapidly, tell us about your U.S. takeover.
So on the U.S. side, and as a TSX-listed company, again, we're prohibited from plant-touching activities. So we can't grow, we can't operate retail stores, but we can sell these grow pods, we can sell infrastructure, we can provide consulting and licensing services. So that is the main focus of the US expansion currently. But if we see similar trends in these US markets that we saw in Canada on legalization, I think as we see an evolving regulatory framework, things like safe banking and some of the other components in front of the feds currently, we're going to see a wave of build-outs of facilities, cultivation capacity. Again, the big pitch for these US operators that Delta 9 can partner with is really, we've seen the mistakes made in Canada. We've seen how we can build out these facilities to be very successful in producing standardized, high quality, high potency, high yielding cannabis products. We really, I think, then look to the US and see that as we look to partner with these groups in advance of federal legalization, there's then the opportunity on legalization for a company like Delta 9 to come down and acquire these companies, really bring that vertically integrated model that we've made successful in the Canadian market, come and replicate that in the US market.
Yes, very clever of you to be proactive about it rather than reactive, because no one knows exactly when federal legalization is going to happen. But if and when it does, I think you'll be poised to make a seamless transition. But my question is, compliance is very tricky, even state to state. So what is your position on that?
Yeah, and that's, again, an area that we're quite experienced in. In the Canadian market, we are federally licensed by Health Canada. We are provincially regulated on a province by province basis for distribution and then also for retail. So we're quite versed in having to dive into these provincial markets where we see nuances in regulation, whether we're able to fully integrate into retail or not. What are the different marketing and advertising restrictions province over province? Even funny restrictions like in the province of Alberta, I can't sell a Delta 9 branded t-shirt. So you do see some of those, but again, I think the benefit that we will enjoy, that a lot of the Canadian operators will enjoy, is we do operate in a highly regulated environment. We are used to very stringent regulation, and we're used to having, again, that look state by state to really maximize value.
I think it's important to point out to our audience who might not be altogether familiar with the restrictions in Canada that there's absolutely no advertising allowed.
Yeah, in Canada, we treat cannabis a lot more like tobacco than we do beverage alcohol. So very restrictive from a marketing and advertising perspective, very limited in terms of how we can get the word out there on our products, our brands, and really guide consumers toward the end product. That's where we feel there's huge value in that vertically integrated model. You have Delta 9 stores right there in the community, obviously pushing, again, that brand awareness toward the end consumer. But it's one of the few ways that we can actually advertise ourselves is by being a bricks and mortar retailer.
And would you say that's your most creative workaround or most effective marketing strategy?
I think we've seen, again, in terms of our market share in store, about 25%. Just by example, Canopy growth within our store, their brands are only 18% market share. So we do enjoy outsized market share within our own stores, obviously, guiding the conversation with consumers, the bud tenders, and really driving the narrative towards Delta 9 products. But retail, a high growth segment for us. We opened 2020 pre-COVID with 4 operating stores. We're now 16. We see ourselves towards 30 to 40 operating stores by the end of 2022, and expanding on a mix of organic store build-outs and M&A within the Canadian space. So I think we're now doing approximately 50 million in annualized revenue run rate just from our retail. The company's north of 70 million annualized revenue run rate as of our latest quarters. So I think retail will really drive a lot of the growth in the Canadian market. And again, that US expansion through the infrastructure segment, we are seeing waves of activity across the US whenever a state legalizes for either recreational or medical purposes.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned retail and you have your own in-house flower. Are there any other products in R&D?
Yeah, so again, we've been historically focused on flower and pre-rolls. We are currently automating our pre-roll line, expanding our SKUs in pre-rolls to be able to produce millions of cannabis pre-rolls in various product formats moving forward. But we are also expanding our line of 510 vape cartridges to include additional flavor profiles, half-gram and 1-gram settings, expanding our ingestible oils profile to include additional CBD and balanced formats. And then from there, working with strategic partners to ultimately include those tricky product categories like beverages and edibles. But again, finding key partners that we can work with on white label in the Canadian market. Ultimately, we see ourselves as a national distributor of Delta 9 branded products and look to participate really across all of those verticals.
And do you have plans to bring your in-house products to the States to be sold in other retailers, or will they remain proprietary?
I think we would look to do the same that we've done in the Canadian market. We would sell through third-party retailers. We would also look to establish our own stores in states that would allow for pure vertical integration. It will vary state by state, but I think, we've seen the success of this business model in Canada. We are one of the few Canadian operators that is positive adjusted EBITDA. We've produced positive EBITDA now for the last 7 consecutive quarters. We produced positive cash flow from operations in our last calendar year on over 52 million in top line revenues. So I think we've seen the success of the business model. I think cannabis is very different than beverage alcohol, than tobacco, and that vertically integrated approach is quite successful.
So what you're saying is, unlike certain other MSOs that will not be named, your business model is profitable.
Yes, that's. I think it puts us in a very small category of Canadian operators, those that have actually achieved positive cash flows from operations, positive adjusted EBITDA. Obviously, we've seen significant volatility in the stock market for cannabis equity. That being said, we are starting to see the winners emerge in terms of the companies that are able to produce fundamental financial and operating results. Ultimately, we look to differentiate ourselves by being a responsible operator, creating sustainable growth and profitable growth.
Wonderful. I want to pivot for a moment. We've had a lot of talk earlier in the day already about social equity and social justice and initiatives like that, but I also want to focus on 50-50 hiring practices. How diverse is your company?
Good question, and it's something we've now brought on a formal policy at the board level, that a certain amount of board representation needs to be visible minorities. It needs to be representation from women as well. So it's something we're looking to now bring in at the board level, at the senior management level. I think in terms of social equity, Delta 9's been very active in the Canadian market in terms of partnering with First Nations, partnering with small communities, investing in small communities. And really, I think that's a model, again, that we could take into the US, where obviously social equity is a key focus. How do we make it so that minorities can participate in legalization and see the upside, the economic development component and jobs creation that comes with legalization?
And do you have a social equity component to your company currently?
It's a mandate that, again, that we have at the board level, that we look to actively participate more on the grow pod side of our business, where again we can look to invest in these communities. We partner with First Nations, not only on the grow pod side, but also in retail. We look to process these products, bring them through, and often there's a significant equity investment. There's a significant jobs creation mandate that comes with all of those. We're able to facilitate licensing for these groups as well through the federal government, based on our experience in working with Health Canada through the First Nations Navigator program. So I think we've looked to be active not only in building out our own facilities, which are Delta 9 owned and operated, but also partnering with third parties, driving more the social equity component.
Wonderful. And if someone on the state side, the US side, wanted to see one of these CCANs, where would they be able to look?
They'll be able to see us at MJBizCon next week with a fully built out shipping container. They'll also be able to see the pods in person in our North Dakota showroom, which will open up later this month. And now that borders are open for cross-border travel, always open to have people to our facilities. Again, 95,000 square feet, 300 operating grow pods, and we now have facilities, over 3 dozen facilities that we have built out for third parties across North America. So there is likely a grow pod near you.
Wonderful. Well, I'll be in MJBiz, so I will come looking for your CCAN.
Perfect.
And if any of you are there too, check it out. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John and Sarah. That was wonderful.